Well, thanks for having me. Thanks, Elizabeth, for inviting me. My name is Zahed, and I'm a senior fellow at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. I've been very heartened to see a lot of the presentations today and the research today. It really complements a lot of what we do. In fact, I'll try not to overlap a lot of the trends that we follow that are replicated in what has been said today in the interest of time. What I really wanted to do is start to look at this issue from a more granular approach. And this is really personal for me because I've spent 10 plus years at the Institute developing the counter-narratives programs there, doing research there on that, and really focused on the impact of targeted hate on communities, particularly faith communities. That's something I think that has slipped a little bit under the radar. There are obviously lots of issues with Islamophobia that have been covered. Aaron covered it very well. That are sort of, the meta trends that we see online and in mainstream media. But when it comes down to communities, whether it's in the UK or the US or elsewhere, that are targeted on the ground, that's when I think that we need more resources, more advice, more research to help people on the ground. And it's not because of any lack of efforts on the legislative fronts or the research fronts. It's just that, we just need to have all the tools available at our disposal. And so I was very fortunate to apply a lot of the things that I've learned over the years to a particular case study, which I'll get into. Just first a little bit about what we do. We work on a number of levels. We both conduct digital analysis of trends around the world. We advise governments on legislation and intergovernmental organizations. We advise the tech companies on better content moderation. We audit their sites to remind them that sometimes their stated objectives are not being met. We create networks of activists and social influencers, young people, but also cities around the world with a network called the Strong Cities Network, to basically coordinate all of these efforts. We're a nonprofit organization. We have a very diverse funding base, a very diverse stakeholder base. Our interest is in coordinating efforts so that we don't replicate them and squander resources. This is just a little bit on our digital analysis. I don't want to go too much into this just because I really want to focus on the case study, but it is very detailed. It combines a number of research streams, a number of methodological approaches, a whole host of platforms online. We have software that we've developed called Beam, which has been used to produce real-time analysis of extremist movements and narrative trends across a whole host of categories. You can see some examples there from a snapshot of some of the data systems we've created. This is just an example of targeted early warning that we've done with our software. This shows you two examples when they're in our early testing phases, one in Australia and one in London, following events and spikes in activity. We can sort of get this on a granular level, on a city level, which is again some of the research that we're trying to share with our municipal networks. We do regular trend analysis on Islamophobia. Did a recent one on Islamophobia on TikTok, one on Islamophobia in France following recent events there. We've done this going back as far as the 2020 elections and before. Obviously mentioned Ilhan Omar and the Islamophobia that she has faced, and we track a lot of Islamophobia around elections, especially Western elections when these issues spike. And there are reports on our website. Again, I can steer you to read more about that. Also, it was mentioned earlier today as COVID-19. We did some reporting on this as well. I'm not going to, again, reiterate that, but just to show that we're on the same page when it comes to analyzing these issues around the world. One case study I do want to bring up is the 2020 elections, and this gives you a little bit of a snapshot of how we work. We wanted to make sure that we got our trend research in the hands of people on the ground who were the targets of these Islamophobic trends and other trends. We worked with a whole bunch of community organizations from all different backgrounds, but including the major Muslim organizations in the US, Impact Care, Engage, and others. We wanted to make sure on a weekly basis we informed them of the trends that we were seeing online during the election season, to make sure that they were prepared in how to respond, both in terms of narrative, but also in terms of security. This was carried out through the 2020 election and even the special election in Georgia. And we felt it was very successful because we had a whole host of partners in the US who helped us coordinate these efforts in a very efficient way. So this, for us, is a bit of a model. It's like the research is great, but if it's not applied on a granular level, on a level where communities with different interests can respond to it and use it in real time, we know how fast this stuff changes. If we can't do that, we'll always be behind the curve. So, and also all of this stuff results in an evidence base that we can use to inform future policy. So that's sort of the background of all of this. The way I look at it, when you look at communities on the ground, Muslim communities in particular, there's sort of three layers of protection that they have. One is legislation, whether it's currently enacted or forthcoming. And there's two that, of course, I'm sure a lot of you are keeping your eyes on: the Online Safety Bill and the EU Digital Services Act. There's also a Code of Practice on Disinformation, all expected to come online this year. There's lots of opinions of how effective they'll be, of course, but once they're enacted, I think there'll be another layer of analysis and hopefully suggestions for improving them to see that communities are protected from hate speech and Muslim communities from Islamophobia. There's also content moderation on behalf of the organizations themselves, this sort of triple shield that they're meant to adhere to, which is, one is removing content that's illegal, that's flat out illegal. The legislation will determine that. Removing content that's against their terms of service, which may not be illegal, but it's been deemed harmful by the platforms themselves. And a lot of what we do is we inform platforms about content that is remaining on their platforms that is, not suitable for their terms of service. We also, of course, advise on illegal content. It was mentioned here earlier about videos still being up. We do this all the time with the platforms to make sure that they understand that they have a responsibility there. So when those layers fail, everything that gets through, and remember, extremists and people who are engaging in Islamophobia are pretty savvy. They understand the rules. They understand how to code their language. Again, I think someone else was referencing that earlier. They understand how to get between those to get their message out. Maybe it's a bit of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, but get out harmful but legal. And this is, again, a term that was, a category that was dropped from the Online Safety Bill, but harmful but legal messaging out that will impact communities on the ground. So at that point, do we just say as a society, well, we've done all we can do, you're on your own? Or do we help these communities fight back? And of course, this day is about looking at counter narratives. I've done lots of research on counter narratives over the years. My sort of line about counter narratives is that when they're done well and when all the pieces are put together, they can be very effective. But it requires a lot of coordination, a lot of timely sort of content creation, what have you, and it's not always possible to get all of that together in time to have a meaningful impact. Doesn't mean we should stop trying, but we need to fill in the gaps. And a big part of these gaps are the resources available on a community level. So I wanted to bring up this case study of a mosque in a town called Harrogate. It's a town that I live in. I've lived in for the last 10 years. It's a town that does not have a mosque for 20 miles in any direction. As the Muslim community grew there was an attempt to purchase a building for a mosque that I was involved in, and I thought it would be a good example to prepare for what I expected to happen, which would be an anti-mosque campaign. There have been, I'm sure many of you have heard of anti-mosque campaigns up and down the UK. There have been plenty in the US, most notably the Ground Zero Mosque in Manhattan. In fact, that spurred a whole host of opposition to mosques in the U.S. I'm sure many of you have seen raucous city council meetings where people are arguing against the approval of the sale of land or a building or change of use to use as a mosque. That has happened here in great numbers, and from my own research and background, I certainly expected it to happen here because of the nature of the town itself. It's seen as a very sort of pretty English town, and I think that there is some reason to believe that there were elements of the community that would be against it. The former head of the National Front lives in Harrogate. Although I will say, as a resident there, that everyone who is, our neighbors were very, very kind to us, and we certainly didn't feel any threat from them. Once the permission was granted for a building that we purchased, we did begin to see this opposition. I want to go into a little bit because it shows how organized and sophisticated it is. One campaign was led by a gentleman who calls himself a mosque buster, and he spends his days looking for planning applications to oppose, and he puts up videos to advise people on the ground in those communities of how to oppose those planning applications. And he advises on not using racist language or what have you, but he advises on undermining the planning consent based on planning issues. Now, he does not hide his animosity and hatred for Muslims. He calls them the enemy. He invokes, there's this screenshot is invoking Hitler. It's like, it's clearly, but these videos are on YouTube, and they skirt the laws, the terms that YouTube has, for example, for content. These, again, reporting them does not get them taken down. And this guy's a solicitor, so he knows the law. So this campaign led to leaflets being distributed across the city, and it left us in a position where we had to come up with a strategy. Now, my advice and what I helped enact in that town was a proactive strategy. We had to first of all get in front of all of the issues that we knew were going to come at us. It's a strategy called pre-bunking. There's a great report by Jigsaw on the University of Cambridge that provides a lot of details on pre-bunking. But basically it's debunking in advance. We knew what the arguments would be, and we had to make sure that we had a strategy to get these in front of local residents and make sure that they understood that these planning issues have been addressed. And we did it through social media. We did it through all the platforms, and we did it through our associations and friendships with other faith groups in the city. But a lot of this is based on good communication strategies. And these communication strategies are sort of your basic strategies of good communication. The language you use, the warmth, humor, thoroughness, accuracy, all of this stuff that's kind of suitable for all kinds of media, but we applied it to social media. Also, we created, before all of this started, a long video that we shared on social media introducing the community and telling the story of who we were. And in telling the story, we tried to shape a narrative that we are a diverse community, we're a community that includes residents for decades, a community that appreciates the friendships we've made in the town itself, and so on. That was put out first because, again, in a community like this, people don't know who you are, and they want to know. This was, again, received very, very well. What was interesting is the far-right accounts that started to follow this and started to raise an issue online, we made a deliberate decision not to associate with them. This issue came up before about amplifying the arguments of people who oppose you. The one time we made an exception is a joke you can see on the left side by an account that's now suspended but had, I think, 200,000 followers. That was our most viral tweet because it was a funny tweet. It was also retweeted by that very account itself as sort of yeah, you got us there. So, I mean, just to show you, there's a whole bunch of strategies that you can choose to, when you engage, how to deflate someone's attack on you, show that you're more human than they are. that are maybe not always the things you think about when you're being attacked. A whole bunch of all of this strategy was really geared on winning public support. Again, there's a lot of, like, this building, for example, used to be a Home Guard club, which is basically a club for veterans of World War II. And there was, that hit a nerve with a lot of people who thought it was disrespectful to those military veterans. So not only did we sort of tell a story about, those military veterans who were Muslim themselves, but we had members of that club come seek us out and actually offer their support. And we made a big story about that. We also had earned media from this. Once this became a campaign, our non-Muslim neighbors, there was leaflets put all over. They went out and tore them down and told us about it and organized amongst themselves. There was earned media on BBC and other outlets where people were asked on the street if they supported us, and they said yes, thank goodness. All of which resulted in a groundswell of community support. You can also see the picture on the right. Church leaders, we had built relationships with them over 10 years, and in our time of need, they came out and stood by us. This proactive engagement, these are just some examples of the responses that we got. And I don't have all the social media engagement available to you, but you can see the way that people respond is a testament to sort of the effort that the people of the community put in to tell their story in a way that resonated. So opposition to this planning application was 2-1 against us until this campaign went into full swing. It flipped to 2-1 in support of us. And that actually held off having a public hearing. It was granted on the basis of that support. After we got support, then the real racists came out. And there was a protest that was planned for Guy Fawkes Day of last year with 2 accounts that were made on YouTube and Twitter. I had my colleagues at ISD do a bit of background check to look at those networks. They were independent accounts apparently created by people in the community. They weren't connected to any nationwide influencers. And I was able to, at the time, get Twitter and YouTube to remove those accounts within 48 hours. This was pre-Elon. This is just probably in the weeks before Elon took over. I don't know if that would be the case now. But when that happened, we realized that actually, there's a lot of people in the community who wanted to publicly talk about this, and newspapers and so forth. And we made a strategy of asking them not to comment on it at all, because we felt that if it was just these 2 accounts, and these were real people. They did another leaflet drop. You can see the leaflets in that picture. But there was a guy who, in a mask in our bus station, took a picture of himself, put it on his account to show that he was there. And we got all our community to not talk about it publicly, the press not to talk about it. And when that day came, no protest materialized. So it just goes to show you that there are strategies you can put in place when you think there might be a threat. Do you want to amplify that threat? Do you want to make sure, because these people couldn't find support on the 2 most used social media platforms, and it was just them, they gave up, and no one else, came to sort of save their protest. There are other great resources when it comes to mosque opposition. Again, this has happened a lot with mosques all over the U.S. and here. The ISPU, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, a U.S.-based think tank, has put out a great guide on resources which have a lot of these strategies. It could complement some of the things that I've talked about. So, what we want to do is we want to make sure that communities aren't helpless. That, through a combination of, lobbying on good legislation, lobbying tech companies to sort of follow through in the terms of service as we did, and learning from what's happened to other communities. There's no reason that communities have to reinvent the wheel and learn the hard way every time. It's easy to tell your story. It's easy to build alliances with other people. It's easy to sort of monitor local traffic on social media. We had a task force that basically looked around, including, again, Muslims and non-Muslims, looking for tweets and other social media posts and alerting us and allowing us to respond within hours. That's not that hard to do if you can coordinate your efforts and you have the resources at hand to sort of understand the process. There's more at our website. I'm just going to, there's actually a detailed description of this case study at our website in the section called Digital Dispatches. We do reports regularly on Islamophobia and other extremism and webinars and podcasts, etc. You can find out more at our website at isdglobal.org. or ask me. I'm happy to share more on this. And we hope that this is another part of the toolkit that everyone can use to combat Islamophobia. So thank you.